Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast. And joining me is one of the best Astros Twitter follows, Larry the GM. You guys know him. His website, LarrytheGM.com. And it takes a data-based analysis of the Astros. Is that a good description, Larry?
I think, yeah. Well, I like to call it the place where smart fans go. That's my new tag. So, but that's what we do. We really take a data-based analysis approach to the questions of the day in the Astros world.
Yeah, I always love that real analytical approach, and it gives those people out there that are just trying to figure it out through the eye test, which isn't always great, to give them a real idea of what's going on. And before we get started, I want to remind our listeners real quick to follow me on TikTok. I'm now on TikTok. I've joined that generation. Houston Sports Talk Robert is the moniker, and I'm posting short Robert rants regularly. You can already see those, which, by the way, you can find on my YouTube page. All right, Larry, Dusty Baker's got a couple of major playoff decisions in October, and I thought you're the guy to go to on these. Let's start with Maldi versus Christian Vasquez. And since the Christian Vasquez trade, Maldi has started more than half the time.
Yeah.
Now, is that the right thing to do? Can you break down their numbers this year and what you've seen offensively and defensively from those two?
All right. Well, no, it's not the right decision, but let's get there a little bit. So, it's essentially at high level, Maldonado is batting, has a 241 on base percentage, a 347 slugging. And then Vasquez is 331 on base percentage, 440 slugging, 420 slugging. So there's a tool out there. And in fact, I wrote about it, just put it out today, Robert, that you can put those two numbers in and essentially get build a lineup of your lineup, and it'll project number of runs that lineup will score. So essentially what I did for a couple of these key questions we're talking about is I built a lineup of all Maldis and a lineup of all Vasquez's. All right. So the lineup of all Maldis scores 2.37 runs a game. And the lineup of all Vasquez's scores 4.68 runs a game. So now if you think okay, that's a lineup full of them. So you can divide that by 162 games, and divide that by 9. You get the impact per slot in the lineup. So basically, that decision every night that Dusty Baker is making, a lineup full of Vasquez's is 2.3 runs more than Maldonado. So that decision every night is about 0.26 runs, just independent of anything else. Now, someone might actually say, well, I think Maldonado is worth more than 0.26 runs per game. I don't know why one would say that, because I think we can tend to think of Maldonado in terms of who he was as a catcher in 2018 and 2019, and not who he is as a 36-year-old catcher now. So Maldonado right now, Vasquez has thrown out 31% of the runners that try to steal a base. Maldonado's thrown out 28. I bet you polled 80% of the Twitter world, they would swear Maldonado's going to throw out more runners than Vasquez. That's just simply not true. The defensive metric, defensive run save, it's the one that essentially gave Carlos Correa the Gold Glove last year. Vasquez has a +5 DRS. Maldonado's got -2. This is a way of saying Maldonado's actually not even a mediocre catcher at this point. He's below average. And in framing statistics, because I think that's another thing people think Maldonado's a great framer. He's actually, again, worse than the Vasquez. So there's really no real metric that is a high value metric that one can point to say you should be pitching Vasquez versus Maldonado. Now people will say, well, you got to talk to JV and Lance McCullers Jr. about that, and they're all on the Maldonado trade. Well, I wrote an article about Maldonado, The Truth Hurts. I would just invite people to read that, because I dealt with the psychological aspects of why players would pick one player or not. and it has to. A lot of it is deep down. It's in psychological terms. It's tribalism. It's the person they know and the person they're very comfortable with, versus somebody new. So actually, by if we're gonna actually have Vasquez pitch in the playoffs, we need to have Vasquez be catching for the big three, the biggest three pitchers we're gonna have in the playoffs, which are Verlander, Valdez, and McCullers. And we haven't done that yet, and that's just it's just silly. And even Dusty's admitted in press conferences that it needs to happen. So because what happens if Maldonado gets hurt in the other scenario? If you just keep this mantra of like, well, they're the catchers for those three. Maldonado's their personal catcher. Well, what happens if he's not available in the postseason? You've never given Vasquez an opportunity to get comfortable with those pitchers. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. So at the end of the day, Christian Vasquez is a near all-star level catcher, and Maldonado's not. And the fact that we're even having this debate is quite silly, and it's very, very frustrating. But those are the numbers. The reality is, every single night that you play Maldonado over Vasquez, you're cutting your run potential by almost 0.3 runs a game.
Yeah, the other part of that, and one of the things that you're talking about is, can these guys succeed? Well, Justin Verlander's got a Hall of Fame career without Martin Maldonado. Lance McCullers won a World Series and pitched pretty well in 2017 in the playoffs without Martin Maldonado. So, right there, those two guys, we know what they can do without him. And the idea that, that Maldonado is making that much of an effect, you thought, well, maybe it's the Latin guys that he's affecting. Well, Christian Vasquez is a Latin guy. I mean, the language barrier, whatever you want to, however, which angle you want to go at, I think it pretty much comes down to all of that. And Christian Vasquez, he's won a World Series. Martin Maldonado hasn't. That's another fact too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's just really there's no logical argument one can make other than, it's a devotion. It's almost like, and I called it a religion on Twitter. It doesn't make me very popular when I do, but that's at this point, those people that just hold to this Maldonado like devotion, that's really what it is. It's a religion.
At the moment you and I are talking, Chas McCormick is missing games with a dislocated finger. But we know Dusty has a zero confidence in a Chas McCormick as a center fielder prospect. We know his offense light years better than Myers and Dubon. I can't imagine Dusty's going to argue that point. But what is the real story behind Chas's defense in center field? Does Dusty have anything to stand on right there?
Well, okay. So do you want the metrics, or because I don't know, but I was watching Dubon play the other day in the outfield, and he looked pretty lost out there for a minute. So I think Chas McCormick, when he plays the outfield, doesn't give you the spectacular plays, but he does a good job of feeling the. Okay, I think, to be fair, I think Dubon and Myers have greater range. I mean, I think it's just they're faster people. But number one, I don't think Jake Myers today is even a viable option to be playing postseason baseball. Now, if he gets better, he starts hitting. My answer for Myers is he needs to be playing every day in AAA and give him a chance to figure out whatever's going on with his swing, or building up the strength he needs to be able to hit. So as far as I'm concerned, Myers isn't even an option. And so until that happens, because I would say I believe the metrics that think Myers is a better defensive outfielder than Chas McCormick, but it's not like Chas McCormick is that DRS metric I talked to you about, right? You spread that over because Chas hasn't had a lot of time in center field. I was gone on vacation for 11 days, and finally, when I was gone, Dusty Baker decided to play Chas McCormick in center field after I wrote the article. Like, why do the Astros hate Chas McCormick? I mean, I love frustration level, Robert. Like, why do they hate this guy so much? So read that article, folks, and you'll get the full LarrytheGM perspective on it. But Chas McCormick, defensive run save, positive one. There's nothing wrong with that. He's above average. It says he's above average. As a center fielder, it's positive two. There's something called a UZR, which is an ultimate zone rating, and you frame it in UZR over 150. He's again a positive 1.7. His center field is 22.9, which actually belies what I said about his range. That's saying Chas McCormick has elite range in center field. I don't necessarily believe that. Some of these defensive metrics take time to really level out to true reflection of value, true reflection of talent. But his outs above average 4 and outs above average as a center fielder 5. All right, so all those numbers say that Chas McCormick is an above average outfielder and an even better center fielder. Dubon, guess what Dubon's outfield defensive run saves number is? -1. So this belief that Dubon's a better outfielder, like the metrics don't agree with that. His UZR is UZR over 150 is 3.9, slightly better than Chas as an overall outfielder, but it's odds above average 0 versus the 4 from Chas McCormick. So just focus on the overall outfield metrics. I think those probably do a better, fairer job, but they're no better for Dubon as a center fielder. They're actually worse. It just says that these two, they're as far as defensive metrics go, they favor Chas, and at the worst case scenario, they would be like, there's no real difference between these two as an outfielder. And I think that's because Chas McCormick's a natural outfielder and Dubon's a natural infielder, and you just stuck him on the outfield. Like today he missed even Dusty said he missed the cutoff man, and the play at third that everyone was raving about would have been a heck of a lot easier if he just thrown it to the cutoff man. And, I mean, he got there, he got the out barely, but that would have been it could have been a much easier play, and it might not even look that spectacular. Chas would have just thrown it to the cutoff man. The cutoff man would have thrown it to the third, and the guy would have been out. So the thing about defensive metrics is really hard. Now, there's something that we need to deal with, though. Okay, when everybody loves their defense, but do people realize that Chas McCormick is literally a top 10 offensive player in this league right now? When we're playing against left-handed pitching, it's insane to continue to frame Chas McCormick in all these terms and ignoring the just incredible job he's doing as a batter versus left-handed pitching.
And let me also remind everybody that when he's batting against right-handed pitchers, his numbers are about the same and maybe even a little bit better than Dubon and Jake Myers too. So it's not like he's been terrible he's been so bad against right-handed batters that you can't put him in the lineup because of those other two guys. I don't think there's anybody except Dusty that's believing in Chas McCormick, but I just wanted you to lay it out there for us. Let's go to Will Smith, because the Will Smith trade happened a few weeks ago. And since then, he's looked more like our Fresh Prince or less like our Fresh Prince, as in Will Smith, more like the enemy of the state, Will Smith. There are little Will Smith references. And even if he gets through an inning, Larry, without a run, there's always traffic on the bases. I can't see a reason for him to be on the postseason roster, especially with 2 of our 6 starters as bullpen candidates who are going to be much better than Will Smith. Am I wrong? What are you seeing, if anything, differently?
So, Robert, when that trade happened, my immediate reaction was like, what the hell are they doing? Why did they? I mean, I asked for you guys to trade for a left-handed pitcher that was better than Abreu. That's actually been my mantra for 2 years when it's been at the trade deadline talking about relief pitchers. They have to be better than Abreu. And that's a really high bar right now because Abreu's pitching really well.
Exactly.
And Will Smith doesn't meet that bar. But then I started digging into the numbers. Will Smith has really got a very good slider. And I won't have time to really get into the details about this, Robert, but Will Smith's fastball and his curveball has been a disaster. this year, and his fastball has been really hittable, but his slider has been really, really good. And so my belief was, and they were actually doing it for the first few games, um, is that they were going to turn Will Smith into like some other left-handed specialists that are in that article that are very slider dependent. Um, and if so, Will Smith may actually be a very serviceable left-handed relief specialist.
Well, here's the deal though with left-handed relief specialists now is that you can't bring them in at the beginning of the inning because they've got to at least face three batters. And so if you bring him in and he's struggling, it really is bad because you can get in trouble pretty quickly. Now, is Will Smith good enough to where there's two batters that he's coming in to face that are both lefties and you already have two outs and you feel good enough like he's going to get one of those two guys? That's another story. But this is totally different than the Tony La Russa days where you could just bring in a guy for one batter or two batters or something like that.
Right. So the ultimate question, and I think this is something that smart Astros fans should really be monitoring. Like, number one, what is the pitch selection that Will Smith has for the rest of the season? How is he doing? So Will Smith is actually, no, let me ask you, Robert, what do you think Will Smith's ERA in August has been? As an Astro, what do you think his ERA has been?
It's not been good, but more than anything, it's just I don't see him getting clean innings. I mean, there's always traffic, like I said, always traffic on the base paths, and you can't have that when you're going up against playoff teams, and then he's going to be facing real teams. Because remember, since he's gotten here, the Astros haven't exactly faced murderer's row as far as the quality of competition.
They played Atlanta, and Baltimore's not bad. I mean, they've played the schedule's about to get super easy for the next 18 games, and then we finish with a little bit of more of a challenge. But his ERA actually in August has been 3.6, which is not bad. It's actually better than it has been the whole rest of the season. His Woba versus lefties has been 303, which is actually pretty good. His Woba versus lefties, righties have been a real problem. So the point I'm trying to make is I don't think we know yet related to Will Smith. I think it was a gamble. I think they can fix him. And I think that's essentially what he's essentially in the laboratory being worked on right now. And we're going to see by September whether or not that changing of his pitch profile is going to work or not. At the end of the day, the one thing, Robert, it's really hard to project. I mean, I think we want to talk about pitching staff in the postseason, right? So let's talk about it. So you have the Astros, I believe, are about to call up Hunter Brown. And I don't know if he's going to be a starter or he's going to be a long reliever, but the Astros have 3 guaranteed starters for this postseason: Verlander, Valdez, McCullers Jr., assuming they're all healthy. Then they have what I believe are going to be 4 long guys that essentially they're going to be able to tandem start with any of those other ones. One of them is going to be a starter. I can't tell you who that 4th starter is right now in the postseason because I don't think they know. I think it's an open competition, but it's Urquidy, Garcia, Javier, and I don't think they're actually going to start Brown. I think Brown's going to be in this category of long reliever. So I'm out at 7 pitchers, Robert, and I haven't even started talking about a bullpen yet, right? So assuming he's healthy, you got Presley, Montero, Neres, and Stanek in the bullpen. That's 11. Abreu's 12. You're done. You don't even need 12 pitchers in the ALDS.
I think they went with 12 last year as far as pitchers were concerned. And you said it because you can piggyback those guys in games 3 and 4. So if Christian Javier, say, is one of the starters and Lance McCullers is the other starter, and those guys have a tendency sometimes to not be able to go more than 4 or 5 innings because of pitch count, you can piggyback with Urquidy and Garcia. And I don't know what you think, but I actually love Garcia. I know people are like, well, can Garcia do that? But if you look at his numbers, and I'm sure you were going to bring this up, first 2 times through the batting order, he's really good. It's the real drop off for him is that 3rd time through the batting order. And I don't know about you, but I like Christian Javier as a starter because if he's right, you can get 7 innings and 14 strikeouts, and he's got the kind of stuff that can beat anybody when he's on. And the other thing about Christian Javier is third time through the batting order, he just gets better. He gets better second, third time through the batting order, unlike some of the other guys on the staff.
Yeah, it's almost like isn't it like his first? It's early innings for him. That's more of the challenge. I think I'd have to go look that up.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
And so these guys are like every one of them has a little bit of different flavor, and figuring out how to mix and match them is going to be one of the things that we as Astros fans should really be excited about. But so yeah, so you get to 12 pitchers, and I haven't even said Smith, Martinez, Maton. None of those guys are probably on the postseason roster. And imagine Dusty Baker not having the Maton Jack in the Box of runs to pull out during the postseason. I joke about Maton that he's the Jack in the Box. Every time he pitches, it's like cranking the wheel on the old Jack in the Box toy. And sometimes the runs pop out, and sometimes they stay in the box. That's how I feel about Maton. Like, you never know what you're gonna get with him. But that's so. If they're healthy, none of this matters. And I think Hunter Brown's coming. People say, well, why would you bring Hunter Brown into this? Well, I know, Robert, you probably remember David Price in the postseason that year when he was a rookie, and he just came in and just mowed people down, and people were like, who the heck is this David Price? No one was prepared for him. And he was like a revelation to that team in the postseason. So that's kind of the role I can see. And most of this discussion about the bullpen, if those starters are right and those long relievers are right, I mean, we're talking maybe 1-2 innings a game for the bullpen. It's going to be hard to get anybody but Montero and Presley innings.
Yeah, Hunter Brown, electric stuff. I mean, you look at what he's done in AAA. I throw away the offensive numbers in Sugarland because it's such an offensive league, but I have a way more respect for the pitching numbers, and his pitching numbers have just been rock solid all year. His stuff is, top of the rotation type stuff. And I really feel like if they give him a chance in September to see what he can do, there's a really good chance you got to throw his arm into the equation. And I mean, I definitely would take him over the Will Smiths and the Phil Matons and all those guys that you just mentioned at the back end of the bullpen. I want to get next quickly to Yordan Alvarez, because Saturday night he publicly says he's got a hand injury bothering him, not the same hand that he hurt in July. He rested Sunday, but Dusty said he'll be back in the lineup Tuesday. Have you noticed anything? And, I wonder, with his injuries and everything that's going on, if Aledmus or Brantley were healthy, if Dusty might have given him a week or two to heal right about now.
Yeah, so I think he's going to go to the injured list. Number one, there's no real reason not to be doing that with him. I'm not 100%. I'm not 100% sure it's still not the same problem he had with his other hand. I guess I hadn't heard it was.
No, he said it was the other. He said on the Saturday press conferences it was the other hand. And the Astros have played everything safe, so I can only assume that they feel like this is something that he just has to play through, because otherwise it's just going to take an off season to recover or something like that. But I feel like they've looked at it and they're like, well, we don't know what a week or two or whatever is going to do for it.
Well, so yeah, Robert, my son's an athletic trainer, and so he actually has dealt with this hamate injury before. It's a 6 to 8 week type of recovery. So if it's the same problem he had in the first hand, it's a 6 to 8 week recovery. They don't have time to do that. So there's two different like treatment options. One is, you get the surgery and 8 weeks later you can play, or you don't get the surgery, you give 2 or 3 weeks of rest, and then you hope that it's good enough that rest brought down the inflammation and that you don't re-aggravate the bone and the bone spur there, and you get the surgery in the off season. That's obviously what they're going to have to do if it's truly the hamate bone in his other hand that's bothering him too. Something weird is going on there, Robert, that he's got that. So number one, I believe that it's a mid injury. You just look at his statistics. like from July 30th to now, Yordan Alvarez has a 78 WRC plus. That boggles your mind.
Yeah, his OPS is in the, I think, low to mid 600s or something like that.
It's just, that's not Yordan Alvarez, and he's got no power. Now, one of the things I think, he was playing a lot. He was playing 25 of the last 29 games, and this is a guy that was, we thought was recovering from the other hand injury. I don't know that in hindsight, that I would have been playing him all that much. Although that's second guessing looking back. He also played a lot in left field. And a lot of that's because there hasn't been anybody else to play left field in some ways. And Dusty's refused to play Mancini in left field. So I think you just got to start putting Mancini in left field and face, full disclosure, Mancini's not a great left fielder, but he's a great batter. So take whatever consequences there are with him being in the field and just roll with it. And if that means you keep Yordan Alvarez from being exposed to both defensive potential injuries, I would just do that and try to roll with it that way. But I would actually put him on the IL for 10 days and just give him a if nothing else, a mental break and let him figure out what's going on and just rest. um having rest in late August, early September for somebody like Jordan Alvarez, and then having him have 2-3 weeks of getting back ready to go before the postseason doesn't sound like a too bad of a thing for me.
All right, I got a quick wild card thing to ask you, and then I want to get you to give me a quick wild card thing that's on your mind. But one quick thing that I think we saw to go under the radar a little bit this week was Justin Verlander. Chandler Rome did a piece on him and how he's a better teammate this year. Maldi said overall, quote, he's a totally different guy from 18 and 19. And I don't think he was a bad person in the past. This is Maldi speaking, but I think he's more open to helping young guys, helping the team, having team dinners, constant communication. And that leads me to this point. I'm wondering, Larry, are you willing to sign him for 3 more years at age 40 if it comes to that? I'm guessing it's going to be at least in the neighborhood of $100 million because you and I have just witnessed this big Yuli drop off, and he's 40 years old now in this next contract. So Yuli dropped off a cliff all of a sudden in this last year.
Yeah, Robert, you're gonna make me unpopular, Robert.
You're saying no.
I'm just the most unpopular person in the National Twitter a lot of times anyway. But so what does JV want? Number one, let's have that conversation. Like, what can we do to make him happy with whatever it is that he wants? If we could do a series of 1 year or maybe rolling 2-year contracts with him, but that number is going to be really, really big, Robert. That we're talking 40 plus. I think he's going to get, he's going to get Max Scherzer type numbers, and because somebody's going to come bring it to him. Like the Yankees, don't you know the Yankees would love to have Justin Verlander for the last 3 years of his career? So what is $120 million to the Yankees? And so I know Jim Crane loves him some Justin Verlander. So, and there should be a lot of goodwill with Justin based on, the number one, the contract they gave him this year, and the fact that they were paying him when he was sitting. His actions are the actions of somebody that seems to be settled in and thinks he's going to be here. But I think that things can change, Robert. And he gets what if he gets a $50 million offer from the Dodgers? What is he going to do? And so it's just one of those issues that I can't answer because I don't know, number one, what he really wants, and number two, what other teams are going to do. But I think some other teams are going to be really desperate to get him off the Astros. Now, the other thing is the Astros, don't take this the wrong way. It's not that the Astros don't need Justin Verlander. Every team needs a Justin Verlander. But if there was ever a team that has a pitching profile, we just talking about Hunter Brown. Hunter Brown should be okay, not the next Justin Verlander, but the next ace on this team. And if Forrest Whitley can actually start pitching to where his promise was, Forrest Whitley was the best pitching prospect in baseball 3 years ago. So do you really want to tie up $45-50 million for the next 3 years in Justin Verlander? I don't, but I think that's what the market value is going to be. And eventually you're going to have to pay Valdez. Eventually you're not going to have to pay him very soon, but you're going to want to pay Garcia. You're going to want to pay Urquidy. You're going to want to pay all these other guys. And it's going to be a time period where you're going to be paying Tucker and everybody else. Sooner or later, you're going to run out of money. Okay, people say, nah, baseball owners have more money than anybody. But I mean, Jim Crane's just not going to run a $400 million payroll. So that's where I'm at with that. Basically, I didn't answer because I need to understand what the actual equation is. If he wants a 5-year, $40 million a year contract, you can't do that. If he wants a series of rolling 2-year contracts, maybe you can convince yourself to do that.
And I'll say one thing about Forrest Whitley. I was watching the video of him today, as you and I are speaking. This would be Sunday, and just seeing how he looks. And the one thing that became blatantly obvious to me is this guy's totally revamped his windup to where it looks much easier. It doesn't look like he's putting as much stress on the arm. I looked at what he was doing 3 years ago, and I was looking at the YouTube video of, the Forrest Whitley 3 years ago, and it was much more of an over the shoulder, and he was bending backwards, and he's putting all this torque into his arm, and there was an ease about his windup, and he still has this incredible stuff that just looks so natural coming out of his hands, and it's still explosive, and it looks like he's barely putting in anything into it, and he comes a little bit more across, which I think is going to help the movement on his pitches as well, as opposed to being straight overhead. So I think the Forrest Whitley that we saw, if he can just stay healthy, and maybe this windup is going to mean that he can't stay healthy, you can't just totally discount him because he's just so talented. And if you could just figure out a way to keep him on the field, he's got this stuff. Man, there is a ton of other stuff that I want to talk to you about. I want to bring you back in before the season is, because we're running out of time here. I want to bring you back in. We're going to have to talk about the lineup because I think everybody wants to know what the good lineup is for the Astros coming the postseason. That's a big deal. I know Jeremy Pena is a big question mark for people out there. So we'll tease all that because I want to talk to you about that soon too. But I want to give you a couple extra minutes just to plug your site, what all you've got on there, and where people should go for everything.
Well, the good thing, Roberts, every single one of those questions you just asked has been answered in the last 2 weeks on the site, and most of them today. So I went through and did a series of the matchup of, like I did with what I talked about with Maldi and Vasquez. I did the same thing with Yuli and Mancini. I gave you the run differential there. I did the same thing in the center field with Dubon versus Myers versus McCormick. With the result of there. Then I put together what, based on where we're at today, assuming that Diaz is in the lineup, what my optimal lineup today would be versus a right-handed starting pitcher and a left-handed starting pitcher. All that is on the website, LarrytheGM.com. Just recently I wrote about McCormick. We've written about Pena in the last 2 days. So we are actively on the site. And the thing about my site, I tease that it's where the smart fans go. Sometimes people have told me they have to read my articles like more than once to really, like, Larry, I had to read it a couple times before I could understand everything. You were giving me all these numbers and everything, and sometimes it helps to talk through those articles. So I'm trying to figure out different avenues. This is obviously like one where we can dig into an article and we can like, okay, what are you trying to say with this, Larry? What are you saying about Pena? I'm saying that he needs to either bat second or he needs to bat seventh. Don't bat him sixth and or seventh, eighth, or ninth. And if you bat him second, you might be surprised how quickly Jeremy Pena breaks out of his slump. And so I was really happy today when we actually did that. I was also happy with Yuli batting sixth, because batting Yuli second was one of the worst things you could be doing. So those are the things that are in the website. Those are the things that I write about. People, I would invite them to go to the website, subscribe at the website. So there's a little link there. You put in your email and you'll get an email notification when I put something out. So that way you don't have to wait for somebody to either to me or somebody to send you a Twitter notification. You'll get the notification and you'll be an insider and know what's happening on the website.
Yeah, we're on the same page on Yuli. His numbers in the 2-hole compared to the 6-hole. I just posted on Twitter today, and he's about 150 points better in the 6-hole than he is in the 2-hole. You don't know what's going on in those games, but I just found that extremely interesting. And for sure, he's just not getting it done in the 2-hole at all. And you need a guy that can get on base, and Yuli's not ever been known as a walk guy, and he's not doing it again this year. But there's definitely some stuff about the lineup that you and I disagree on. We're going to get to it at another time, but thanks so much for doing this. It's at LarrytheGM, LarrytheGM.com. Great to talk with you, man.
All right, take care.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, you can support the show by subscribing on YouTube and commenting on the videos. Listen to Houston Sports Talk on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, and Google. Don't forget to tell a friend and share our show on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.